Hello.
There we go.
Okay, I'll sit close to it.
Now you get to see how extra really is.
Yeah. So, hey guys. Welcome to the extra credits panel. I am Dan. I usually sound way higher pitched, but this is what I sound like normally. So, beside me here is our writer and co-founder of the show, James. Surprise guest because he wasn't in the official thing, but then he showed up, so we decided he should be on the panel. Our newest artist, Dan Jones, is also here. So, I don't think we have anything to really announce or talk about, so let's not waste time.
I swear we had something awesome to talk about, but I'm sure I'll remember it halfway through.
Sure, okay. All right, now before we even actually start that, I should let you guys know, something that we've made a bit of a tradition with our MAGFest panel specifically, is that just because we've decided that we are happy to stay here and answer literally every question you guys feel like asking. Now we don't have the room for like 3 or 4 hours, obviously, but at the end of the official time of this panel, we will go ahead and disperse.
There's another room.
But there is another room that they said that we can use. I think it's the forums room. And if some of you guys wish to then leave and say that that's the end of the panel for you, then good, because that's totally fine. There are some great concerts and shows and stuff that you really shouldn't be missing. But if you really do feel like missing those great concerts and shows and stuff, then you can join us in the forums room and we'll stay until literally you guys are done asking us questions.
It really doesn't matter. Like last time I think we did it for 5.5 hours.
Yeah.
And that's fine, right? This is the one thing.
What else are we doing? Anyway, so how do we want to do this? We just want to do like.
Do we not have mics for over out there in the?
Oh,
excellent. Are you just abandoning us to answer all the questions while you're running around the mic?
I'm done.
No. All right, we have a new. Oh, it's not really short for it. So the answer is no. That mic will not work. Shouting? No shouting.
All right, so. No, we don't need to.
Do we have? I think we should just call on the person who's currently waving his hand to buy us time to figure out how we're going to do this.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, 2 things. One, I have an actual question that I want to pose to you guys later, but secondly, I do have a way around this. What panels tend to do is they get anyone who's willing to stand in line for the entire time to form a line in front of the microphone, and then they ask the questions in the order that they line up.
That is traditionally what they do, but one, I don't want people to stand too. It only goes there.
So there'll be a line standing right in front of everybody.
How about this? We'll call on people and we'll just repeat the question.
If you guys are having a hard time, we'll try to repeat the question, and if you guys are having a hard time hearing, then let us know and we'll just change up our system. We'll improvise.
And by the way,
question no matter what.
yes. Is anyone? Oh, we're getting this recorded?
Yep. Cool.
Can we get this at the end? Because I've had so many people say I couldn't make it to 8. Like, I'm leaving MAGFest. I would love to get a copy of this.
The whole thing's going on the MAGFest YouTube.
Perfect.
But well, we're talking.
Okay. Anyway, you had a question.
Yeah, and my actual question was, I suck at strategy and RTS type games, but I still want to make a Joan of Arc video game. How would you say, what would you recommend I think about at the starting point of that?
So it depends on whether or not. So the question was, I'm terrible at strategy games. I want to make a Joan of Arc game. I'm not entirely sure why a Joan of Arc game has to be a strategy game, right? I can see anything from a hack and slash Mount and Blade type Joan of Arc games to a Telltale game about Joan of Arc, right? And so don't necessarily pigeonhole it in the genres that we associate with that sort of time period, that theme, but build what you love and build what represents it best. And think about what aspects of that story you really want to tell. And is that going to be best encapsulated by a strategy game, or is there a different type of game that's going to best deliver that message?
Good answer. Okay, you sir. Yes.
So it seems like in the past console generation, with the popularization of first-person shooters and also with the rise of PC games and indie games,
is that with the current console generation, it feels like the Japanese side of the industry has been getting kind of pushed a little bit more and more and more off to the side, and he's wondering if that is a pattern that's going to continue. James, you might have to go.
Yes, I have a couple, and then we have one more person. I always drag out friends. Everything's better with friends. So I have a fellow to introduce in a moment. But first, the question was the resurgence of the Japanese industry. Right? So we're going through a readjustment in the Japanese industry right now. There's a lot of things that the Japanese industry is having to work through. They had kept a static production method for a very long time. If you know anything about Japanese game creation, or if you know too much about Japanese game creation, very often there are things, they've just rebuilt an engine for every single game as the American industry started to build static engines that they could reuse and come to understand, get expertise on, cut costs massively for us. Now that we have to build these gigantic games, you're seeing all sorts of problems with production methodology. The Japanese industry is a little bit falling apart. They don't have the support infrastructure for the sort of independent scene that we have here. But this is a good thing. I think the Japanese games industry will absolutely survive. There's just too much, there are too many culturally interesting things, there are too many people who have the skill set, who have talent. We've seen so many great things come out of that industry. But I think like in any period of readjustment, we're going to soon start seeing the Japanese industry really start to roll the dice, right? We've seen it with Nintendo before. GameCube fails, and they just, on the Wii, on the DS, these were things that everybody was like, that's insane. Nobody's going to want to whack the stick. Who's going to play a handheld game on a touchscreen? I mean, come on, and then we have like iPad, right? iPads and all these things. I think as the Japanese games industry is back more and more into a corner, we're going to see a willingness to take risks that we haven't seen from the Japanese industry in 15 years. And I think that's going to produce some amazing games. So that's the very long answer to your question. Dave, do you want to introduce yourself, or do you want me to do it?
Hello, everyone. My name is Davey. I'm sorry, I have nothing to do with extra credits whatsoever. Other than that, I think it's an excellent show. I was the writer on Stanley Parable, and I succeedingly sweep each and every one of you.
And I wanted to grab Davey because if any of you guys have any questions about, you can only be here till 9-ish, but
9-inch.
oh, 9-ish. But if you have any questions about building an indie game or starting your first time out, throwing yourself at creating a video game, you've gone through this process. So, and all that comes with
Kicking
it.
and screaming, yes.
Yes. And so if there's anything, feel free to direct questions about indie development at Davey too. If there's anything you want to know, I will. Oh, we got a couple hands over there. I'm not going to offer them to your hands, but okay.
I saw sort of the second row head first, but then, yeah.
Okay. Well, it seems like you've never been about globetrotting in what is probably my favorite martial art. I think it's some of the coolest series of global games. Just about exploring Latin America far away. And I was wondering, are there any other regions that we might want to keep an eye on as far as emerging games? Ones that maybe you more really think about
So, question was, I see you've been to some places recently, James. Is there any place that we should look out for more global game stuff? Okay, so to be frank with you guys, one of the reasons I'm going to be very verbose today is when I'm tired, I get talky. I just came from London. This is
He's
my
always
first
tired.
Yes. So, I just came from London. This is my first time in the States in 7 months. I've been in Norway, Germany, France, England, Turkey, Greece, and the United Arab Emirates. And a lot of that was for consulting work, some of it was for Games for Good work, and some of it was to explore these places. I think that for places that we should be on the lookout for, obviously we all know China is an emerging market. I think we're going to see a lot now. The console bans have been lifted now, moving forward a little bit. India is another one that we really should start looking at. We pay far too little attention to the Indian surprisingly, the other two that I really want to talk about are Turkey. If any of you guys are launching like a free-to-play game or anything like that, and you want subscribers, it is so worth it to translate into Turkish. It's unbelievable. Like across the board, everyone I talked to, and then I went there and checked it out, and they're mad for games. They just don't necessarily have the revenue to spend $60 on a game outside of Istanbul, but that's why there's a huge like LOL and Dota scene there. So Turkey is definitely a market for consumers. It's possible. I need to spend more time there. The only developer I really found there though is the guys who made Mount Blade actually. The other market is Poland. Poland is making unbelievable stuff, and for like 6 years now, we've outsourced everything to Poland, right? Like, they have unbelievably skilled developers, and we outsource to them because Poland is currently still cheap. But in 3 to 5 years, the economy of Poland is going to be strong enough that you're going to see a lot more Polish developed internal games, and they'll still be cheaper to produce than Western games because the average wage there is just low. Right? But we've spent so long outsourcing to them that you just have people who are at least on par with the heavily skilled section of the AAA industry here.
All right, let's go from this side. You in the cool Dante costume. Well done.
I don't get that many compliments outside of other cosplayers on this, so thank you.
You bet.
You're not helping me on that.
You're my favorite Dante.
So I have watched your comic video, and that's great. Something that I don't really discuss that much is how you actually choose what your first engine or development platform, where you're starting.
I have some thoughts, but we have someone who has had to face this problem and not.
Well, the funny thing is that the problem that I faced doesn't exist anymore at the time. Stanley happened because I saw Dear Esther and Radiator and thought I could do something in that engine, which was free. And literally the old, like, Source can do two things. It can do hallways and guns. And that's it. It doesn't do anything else. And it's great for those two things. I didn't know how to do guns, and I wasn't particularly interested, so I was like, hallways it is.
Now you know the genesis.
That actually really was how it started. But you know, like, so honestly, like, that constraint was very specifically what was like, okay, well, if I don't have the ability to do literally whatever I want, if I have this one thing, what am I going to do that's interesting with that one thing? What do I really care about? Like, where's this Venn diagram overlap between things I really care about and things I actually am technically capable of? And that cuts it way down, right? I mean, if you could do anything, you go crazy. And I have been in that situation. And like, sorry?
I'm in it now.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, Unity is like Open's world, right? There's such a vast. I haven't dug into Unity yet, but I'm kind of not looking forward to it. I want to do it, but the constraint of having to deal with something and like not being able to change that thing. I mean, that's super, super valuable. And your engine may not provide those constraints, and it's probably a good thing in some ways that it doesn't, but that constraint has to come from somewhere, right? And it can come from your engine, or it can come from artificial constraints that you place on yourself for the engine, or it can come from something else. It can come from your teammates, it can come from an idea that someone gives you. Obviously, game jams, that's the whole idea, working within this constraint. And I think from a design perspective, like as far as actually, your question was about picking an engine, and I tangented off into my own nonsense. But
Voice is better, but I've seen a lot of talk about how to get started in development after you've made that choice, assuming that you have some sort of prior experience and are able to proceed. How do you start before that? How do you really start?
you're talking like in the great beginning of all things.
You remember the first 8 problems?
It's so personal. It's so personal. And you're gonna make it, and then people are gonna ask you, and you're gonna be like, I don't know. Like unfortunate. This is the unfortunate thing, is that the point at which it clicks for you is gonna be on something that is so contingent on your exact personal scenario and what matters to you that doesn't matter to anyone else the way that it matters to you. And no one likes to hear that answer. I mean, I've heard that answer from a billion different people, and I've never liked it.
Well, I have the flip side of that answer. So it doesn't matter, right? Don't sweat it. It doesn't matter if you're wrong, right? Try something, take it, do something, and if it doesn't, you don't like it, do something different, right? Don't worry about it. It's very easy to get hung up on that first moment where you've got that blank canvas with no idea what to do. Just jump into the pool and you'll be fine.
And ultimately, these two answers are the same answer.
It's true, yeah.
Right? Which is the weird paradox.
All right, let's see. Let's go middle toward the back.
Oh wow, that was specific, sir.
Yes, with the hand. Further back. Yes, you're standing out with a black green shirt. Yes. There you go. Perfect.
Hi. It's actually the first time seeing you guys in person, so now I'm wondering why do you modulate your voice in your videos?
Oh,
good
can I get
question.
the story?
Sure.
All right.
It's that time of every panel.
Yes, you've seen this happen before. Many of you have seen this happen before. We have an excellent few of you who haven't seen this happen before. And every week we get asked that question. It's an excellent question. So, way back.
Can I first the question, please?
Oh, the question is, why do we modulate his voice?
You repeated the question.
Yes, so why do we modulate his voice? When we first started Extra Credits, I was sitting at my desk at Activision, and I get this email from a student at Savannah College of Art and Design saying, hey, I took one of your articles that, because I'd been writing for like Edge and Gamma Sutra and these sort of things, really design-heavy articles for the industry for a while. But I really always wanted to talk to you guys, because in the end, what matters is not talking to ourselves, but talking to people who actually play our games. And so I get this email saying, hey, how do you pronounce your name? I used a lot of one of your articles for a video I'm making for one of my classes. And I told him, I was like, you know, I would love to see it when it was done. And I get, a couple weeks later, I get this video. And just like that, right? I'm like, this is how we do it. This is how we can actually have this conversation. This is amazing. I tell them, like, use any of my articles that you want to use. But this is a college project. How many of you guys are in college or have been in college recently? All right, great. So you guys know, like all college projects, this was getting done at like 4 a.m. And this is Savannah College of Art and Design. He's an animator, so they make you hit a very specific time. It has to be 10 minutes exactly. He's written about 10 minutes and 30 seconds from that. How do we fix that? Well, we can redo all the art. I was thinking about it. Let's just speed it up 10% and call it again.
That is essentially the answer, yes. Since we've started, it became an actual show and not just a thing I was doing for class, we've had the conversation a few times, should we lose the voice modulation thing? Because I know some people are put off by it, and I used to pitch it up way more than I do. Some of you have been watching for a long time, or if you try going back and watching the first one now, you'll notice it's super helium chipmunky, and the current ones are not quite so much. But one additional thing that I like about the higher pitched voice is I like that the little cartoon me has his own voice, because something I've noticed with commentators who put their face out there on camera is that how the viewer perceives them affects how the viewer perceives what they're saying every time. And like just your opinion of whoever it is that's talking kind of just affects a little bit how you receive what you hear. So having a little cartoon nobody guy up there and some cartoony goofy voice coming out of it that is not me. I feel like for a lot of people it helps them to listen to what is being said rather than paying attention to me or whoever else is saying it. So I think that is a little added benefit. And also it's just kind of a thing for the show now. I don't think I can change it if I wanted to.
And we actually tried to take it fully away. We've done some test runs with it.
It looks really weird.
It feels really strange, right? Like, all you guys know, everything by design, right? And this is a character that, with this cartoony persona, feels really weird with Dan's like normal low voice.
It totally does. I ran a test and it looked and sounded bizarre.
Totally uncanny. And so, again, this is a voice that fits the character. But we have so many more questions.
We do. Okay, yes. Moving on. You sort of had it in the phone. That helps holding a thing up. I appreciate that. Yes, I am.
Excuse my voice. I've been talking nonstop.
It's day 3 of PAX. We're all lucky to have a voice. We have a cough drop at the moment.
James, I was talking to you yesterday at the indie section.
Yeah.
You asked me if there were some games there that I'd recommend that you
Yes.
would like. I told you some of mine, and hopefully all of you guys had a chance to try some of the stuff there. I wanted to know what you guys thought of what the guys had on display there.
Ooh, do we want to just go down the line?
I haven't unfortunately gotten to play a lot, but Particle Mace is very interesting, very solid, well-produced game, very good local multiplayer, which I really like. And also right next to them, which I got to play, was Extreme Exorcism, which is also just a very lovely, well-produced experience. I recommend popping by there. This actually, sorry, I didn't even know. Is it open tomorrow morning? Does anyone know?
Yes.
Yes.
It is open.
Yes. Okay.
Whether
All right.
developers will be there, I don't know.
Oh,
But
cool.
Was that the game with the like little blocks and you shoot each other?
That's all video games.
Well, no, like it was literally just little blocks, and you would shoot, and you had like a laser. Anyone know the name of it? What was it? Zarbot? Okay, well that one, I played a few rounds of that, and that I could easily get addicted to something like that. It's great.
I really liked, I'm blanking on the name of it. Which one was the one where you're like playing and you bounce off and you... Aerobot. There you go. And the feel on that was just really, it really was. It was excellent. And so that's the one I'm going to go for.
Nice. I didn't get a chance to sit down and play any of them, but I do want to give another vote to Particle Mace, was it? Yes, just watching people play that game, it looked like something I wanted to sit down. Hopefully they will still be here tomorrow, or late tonight. Okay, let's do another question. The shoe.
Please do it. So, I want to know, like, concerning 2014, what do you think was the biggest failure? And what can we learn from it?
Ooh, biggest failure of 2014 and what can we learn from it? Sir, I'm looking directly at you. My eyes are going cold.
I don't want to. Are you referring to something?
No, I just want to see what your answer is. I'm very curious.
You answer first. I'll think about it.
Dan, up to you.
You don't have to answer that, do you?
I know a couple, but I have one that I actually want to say. But
In a very general sense, I mean, there are lots of specific games that did this, but there is a certain trend of AAA publishers, AAA developers putting in a $60 game some really, really money-grabbing microtransaction stuff. And it's not that like DLC and microtransaction is inherently bad. We've talked about that lots of times, and there are lots of games that I like them for, that they're very, I think, respectful of the customer. But there are some that are very disrespectful and very, like, really trying to take advantage of the consumer as, like, rather than offering them like something that they can feel happy to buy and purchase. Well done.
So my answer to this question of what the biggest failure of 2014 and what we can learn from it is something that may be the biggest success of 2015 or 2016. And I'm going to say the Steam Machine. So months and months back, we had all heard so much hype about the Steam Machine, right? And nothing, right? Really not very much. And it's a great idea in some ways. A lot of us have talked about how the consoles are climbing digital distribution anyways, why don't we just bring it to Steam? But they haven't cracked it yet, and especially they're trying to make a controller which replicates a mouse. And we've tried that problem before, we haven't solved it, and I don't know if you guys have seen the touchpads on it. Very interesting approach. A lot of good thinking there. There's a lot to learn about input devices of the future. I don't know if we need a Steam machine with the price of computers today, right? You can get a machine for $500 which runs most of the games that you're going to want to play. Maybe not at the highest ends, but they'll run. Do I need a separate box to run those same machines? That's a market question that I really don't know the answer to, and I'm a little bit skeptical about. So Steam machine's my answer.
Kind of touching on what Dan said, and I'm not sure if it was actually 2014, but it was recent. H1Z1 kind of changed their policies on the fly, and they actually did, for I think a whole day, offered refunds if you contacted the company, which I think that's kind of like a red flag that maybe you should reevaluate action before you change your opinion on a game.
I had some like I was tossing around a few very specific examples of like games that didn't work for me, but I think I was getting too negative in my head. So I don't want to come up here and spread the hate. It's love we got. So also the thing that I think that I thought was done very poorly in a lot of ways in the last year that I think could be used a lot better is Steam Early Access. I think that I mean, the number, so like, you know how like several people will, like unconnected people will say a thing to you, which means that you know it's actually happening to like millions of people? I heard so many people, like other developers say like, oh yeah, my game's going on Steam Early Access. Why? I don't know. And it's like, for a lot of people it was money. I don't think that's the right reason. I think that there is a compelling reason for it, and I think some people have used it for that compelling reason. Having not done it, I don't think I'm a good judge of what is the compelling reason, but we've seen so many people who, you know, not only put this thing out ahead of when it should be shown to anyone, but in doing so they fracture the launch of their game. They're splitting their base up into two separate launches, and I know many people who, you know, have like when the game actually like came time to launch, like didn't get the boost that it should have, because why? It's already out. You know, what are you talking about? And that's in addition to a handful of things. But like I said, I haven't done it. I feel like there are a lot of ways that it could be done better than it is being.
And I just want to add one other thing to my answer. Ubisoft's response to the Assassin's Creed no female playable character debacle. I think there's a lot we can learn both about what we should do in terms of gender equality in games and also about how to do PR. So with that,
all right, let's do another one. You raised your hand like way earlier than I. That has called someone like right behind you, so you can do that. Yes, please, sir.
Well, James and my approach to that, I think, would be very different, because for James, it's...
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. So the question was, I don't know how many people have actually played the Stanley Parable, but there's an ending. Well, for not you people, there's a section of the game where there's literally a museum that details many of the development milestones that we actually went through, and things that actually happened, and changes to the game that were made, and how certain things came to be. And that's So the thing about it though is that it's not like we were just like, hey, I want people to know about how the game was made. It was kind of like very intentionally there to like pull you as a player out of the experience for a minute, and then actually after that you're like pulled very harshly back into the experience. And so it's not about like just a specific piece of information, but more about the transition between states of how we receive information. You know, you're in a certain mindset wherein a piece of information, oh, it means this very particular thing to me. I'm in a very different mindset. Oh, this new piece of information means something totally different. And usually we think of like fiction and documentary as being, you know, separate things that they don't converge, you know, for the most part. And there are some, I mean, in film, I think a lot more than games, there's some very, very interesting films that blend that line and do a really fantastic job of making you kind of wonder where exactly, you know, like, is this actually discussing something real? And I would say that in the Stanley Parable, it was right to use, not because it was more important that people know about how the Stanley Parable was made than other games, but because the Stanley Parable is about shifts in perceptual mindsets. And so it was used as a mechanism, as a tool for that in particular. Which is not to say that it wouldn't be interesting to like also then have like a piece of downloadable content or some, I don't know, some just purely historical thing, which I think is more interesting to you maybe. Or I don't know, I'm speculating.
So I think to each game, how it preserves its history is a function of the game itself. The reason I liked that in the Stanley Parable was because I felt like it was appropriate for the game. And one of the things I really liked about the museum was actually the fact that it showed people that it didn't spring fully formed from your head.
Yeah.
Right? I think that is actually super important, and about how sort of piecemeal and barely held together in some ways these things really are, right? But in a great way, which is the same deconstruction that Stanley Parable itself does, which I very much appreciate about it. So I think it was really appropriate for that game. I don't know if that particular approach would be appropriate for all games. I think there are many different ways of looking at this, even if it's just making available online every version in the version history rather than the final version.
Yeah, for us it suited the project, it was necessary. And actually the other interesting thing about that is that we filtered out, like there's a reason why the particular information is in that room, is because we wanted to be revealing without spoiling stuff. So we were also in the service of the narrative. We were also in the service of, we don't want to spoil if you happen to have not seen a piece of content by the time you get here. So again, the fiction also has a say in what's going on. It's not just purely, you're here to receive information. It's like this information is in service of an emotional experience, or whatever it is that you want to call what people do.
That's a good way. I really like heavy hammer on that sentence. That's it.
All right, let's see. We have a giant feather in the back. Oh, okay, let's do the giant feather. And you have to speak up.
All right. Actually, I wanted to ask a little bit about VR, virtual reality. There's a really good video talking about the Oculus Rift, and people can get motion sick. And I actually have vertigo, and a lot of first-person games I actually will in. So I was just going to ask, as VR is getting more and more popular, how are ways that different developers can use different types of games to make sure that they stay accessible for people like me who might not be able to, pop like I tried the Oculus Rift today. I had a pretty good experience. That was only 5 minutes, and I definitely was shaving after. So I was kind of wondering what your take was on this, and how we can still keep games accessible, but let me play them.
All right, so the question is, with VR becoming more and more of a thing, and the reality that for a lot of people, motion sickness is also a thing, and those two intertwine very, very heavily in a lot of ways. What are some ways that developers are finding to try to account for that, to make this new cool experience playable for the kinds of people who just are going to get sick in 5 minutes? And actually, I'm curious if you've been running into a lot of devs who have been experimenting with it, trying to find solutions.
Yes, but before I talk about solutions, I will reiterate the thing that I said a lot. I am actually skeptical about our current iteration of our VR future, because I have seen in my career VR come and go 4 or 5 times. And it's sort of always been like, 3D movies, where every 10 years 3D movies roll around and everybody's like, oh, they're the future. And it turns out they're gimmick that are really good for some movies, but they're just not the thing that we're gonna do for all movies all the time, because they aren't the best solution. And until we get a space which we can walk around and be physically present in our VR world rather than just tilt our head, I don't think it's going to be this big shift. I mean, how many years now have we been talking about the Oculus Rift? And we still don't see it as, I mean, even making percentage inroads into how we do things. Facebook has the dollars to throw at it to make it a solid reality. I hope someone solves some of the problems with it, but I'm a little bit skeptical still. That caveat aside, I know I've actually seen several companies hire people who are basically virtual haptics experts or virtual kinetics experts, which translates to they understand things like motion sickness really well, and a lot of it is simply in keeping your camera and your head motion aligned. And so there's one of the things we found early on, I'll just give you an example so I can pass this along, is a lot of times in FPS, right, I can move my look with my mouse. If I can move my look with my mouse and with my head, I can start having very, very weird things happen where I'm sort of simultaneously moving in two directions, or my torso is actually twisted in-game, my in-game character's torso is twisted, while my real-life torso is not, and my body freaks out. And so we've seen a lot of things that sort of block some of these things, or eliminate your avatar, your virtual avatar entirely, so that way you don't have the point of reference that your body doesn't understand. So there are steps being taken. They've also done a lot, like up the refresh rate and the pixel density on some of these things, which makes it substantially easier to have two screens this close to your face. So there is work being done, but it's all small individual things. I think it will end up being an agglomeration of small individual things.
I don't have much to say, but there is a sort of bias problem from developers where the more that you use, like the Rift, for example, the less likely you are to become nauseous by it, just like your body acclimates. And it's tough because if you're a developer, you've been using the thing so often, you don't get that motion sickness anymore. It becomes harder and harder to tell. Well, I mean, obviously you can bring people into playtests, but in actual development, practice, I know that that's tricky because there starts to become a gulf between the developer and the player, and I don't know how to resolve that.
All right, let's have another question. Let's see.
I'm so glad you have to pick an item.
With the water bottle right here.
Hello. So extra history. Patreon is at 10K. Hit it, guys. Hit it.
Thank you all.
So with the episode, when you see same topics or same sort of standing at these last two topics, but more topics?
So we will be seeing more topics, and I will die. Thank you. So Extra History has hit the 10K mark on Patrick. A couple of things. We are currently exploring new artists for Extra History. After Single Jedi comes the South Seas Company. It will probably start hitting once a week after the South Seas Company because it takes some time to bring on a new artist, make them fit the art style, all this sort of thing. We will be seeing about the same length, anywhere from 3 to 6 episodes per topic, but we will be seeing more topics because we have a lot of history.
Yes, and we're still figuring out some details, but it may also involve one thing I would like to do, and I don't know if it's possible, but I would like to have the artists, rather than switching off episode by episode like they do with Extra Credits, switching off series by series so that there's a bit of consistency to their look and their art style, because I expect whoever we bring in for Extra History, the other artist is going to bring a little bit of their own flair, just like David does to Extra History, and I would love to be able to have them, have each series really feel like their own when they own it. But since series can be of varying lengths, like Jedi is going to be 6 parts, and Another one might just be 3 or 2. Then that makes some weirdness there with scheduling. So we might start actually also creating and releasing little short one-offs now as well, just for a little quick, like a little quick. I mean, I guess I was going to give little quick glimpses into the historical era, or just a small, tiny topic that you want to.
So some of them will be small things like if there's a particular battle that we think is really interesting, or a particular day in the French Revolution, right? There's some stuff about the Estates General that I think is fascinating that happened in one day that we can have a single episode that doesn't make sense to do in the series. But the other thing that we'll also be doing is sort of why it matters, right? There's a lot of these topics that eventually, in the long term, if we were able to do this for 10 years, I would love to have a lot of series about things like Roman history or whatever, but have those playlists start with something that explains why it's important, why we care about it today. So we might also do those as one-offs, as to fill out between the artists' schedules.
Yeah, we shall see. But yes, it's in the mix. But yeah,
and thank you again.
Coming. Yes,
that is, it's unbelievable to me that like so many people are so interested. Because just one thing to tell all of you: when we started this, we had everyone. We had people from all over telling us, you can't do that. If you put history on a gaming channel, you're going to kill your channel. And we said, no, I don't think you know this audience. And we did it, right? Everybody told us, start a new channel, do it on a totally different name, if you're going to do it. We said, no, I think you don't understand. There is a lot of overlap. You don't give enough credit to people who love games, right? And in the end, we see more views on an extra history than we do on an extra credits. So thank you again. That's amazing.
I'll go normal hand-to-mouth objects. You, sir.
So, I think that,
What was saying? Can you repeat that?
How do we think disabled people can be better represented in gaming?
I think we can do a lot better. Did you play Sly Cooper? Which Sly Cooper was this? Yes! Yes, I thought that was fantastic, right? I think that... Oh, tell me.
because when you watch your writers and you look, it changes.
So it's true. It depends on which side. I took it as saying that it wasn't limiting, right? That in the end. And so I mean, I totally get it, and I understand that may not be even the best message, but I felt like it was an acknowledgement and then saying he can still do what everybody else does. But I would love to hear more about your perspective on it. Well, actually, yeah, sure. Email us another credit. But if there's anything like, have you seen any really good representations? Because I would love to check out more.
That's exactly what I'm at. Honestly, I really had like you said, it's one character look or it doesn't really. It's like I don't. The best I can put it is it's like one of the games. Like right my character while it's only a moment.
Right. Sure.
There was that one game that got Kickstarter or crowdfunded in some capacity that was and I didn't keep track to see what ended up with, but there was a game that is about a function that is like you cannot see anything. It is only through sound that you're. Was that Pulse? Yes. Did it come out? Like I didn't see it. Okay, so that one, something like that actually does potentially like, because I mean, nice thing about games, they can put you in people's shoes. Like if a game can manage to simulate an experience in which you could in some small way get a taste of that sort of experience of having a disability or of just something to help develop that empathy and further understanding. I think games can be great for it. And the more I think about it, it does seem weird that they're not very into this.
And I think part of it is, again, a diversity in the industry issue, right? A lot of us don't know the perspective, don't know what it is that you may have to deal with every day, right? And so our ability to put that in the game is limited, and we need to reach out more. I mean, part of it is we just need to reach out to a community that really understands what we're going to represent.
One game that actually just occurred to me, I think it's out. I hope someone can maybe confirm, but there's a game for iPad called Cry, and it's about a war. It's about a guy from, I think he's in Afghanistan, whose eyesight is destroyed by. The game is very abstract. I mean, it's not about the day-to-day experiences of being blind the way that I think Pulse was that the one that you sounded more like that was maybe a little bit more. But Pry is more of like an emotional exploration of if you had like this faculty and then one day you lost it, what's the internal emotional experience of that like? And I thought it was very well done, and I think it's on the App Store right now.
That's fascinating. I haven't actually heard of that one. I would have to check that out because I'm surprised I haven't come across it.
And that's why I'm wondering if maybe it isn't out and I accidentally played a preview build or something. So I should check or something to make sure that it is out. But I definitely recommend it.
But on the other hand, one of the good things that comes from this is we talked about 2 games which are imminent release, so we're starting to think about it. It's just slow, it's going to be a long process, but at least we're starting to think about other perspectives than the one that we've looked at for so long.
Pride is out.
Pride is out right now? Okay, great.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Next up, let's see. I see someone holding up a phone on this side. Yes, hello.
This is my first time seeing you guys in person, so I want to start by thanking you for your mission going back to VR, Microsoft and Razer and Facebook really want us to believe that this time VR and AR are the future. But what I've been seeing is that everything involved in this is either a new interface on existing mechanics or an artistic experience and not gaming. What have you seen in terms of mechanical methods or mechanics methods for utilizing this potentially new technology?
So, I mean, there's a million things we can do, right? The one that immediately jumps to mind to me is being something like a Secret Service guy, right? You're just standing there, you're looking around the room and threat assessing, right? And you just blink or whatever to indicate that, hey, you should take another look at those guys, right? There's a million different mechanics that we can do that just involve that head motion and maybe some eye tracking. We haven't done that, right? We keep integrating other things. And functionally, it works really great. VR is perfect for anything you're in a cockpit because it feels right to, if you've got a joystick or if you've got a mouse and keyboard, to be flying a space fight. But for individual mechanics that utilize VR, I think we have to start thinking about mechanics about observing the world. And we haven't really thought about that as a mechanic yet. And so I think there's a lot of possibility.
Good answer. All right, let's see. Let's get some more questions. Way over on this side, dark hair. Yes, you're waving your hand. That's you.
Alright, so I guess this depends on what everyone's interested in. Are there a lot of people interested in mobile? Anybody?
Mobile. I want to hear how many people care about mobile.
Okay.
Alright.
Alright, then I'll ask the mobile question. According to the MDA framework, so to say, I was thinking that when you design for mobile, one of the main things you have to take into consideration is that most people are looking for application. And I feel like when designing, sometimes that goes against some of the other things I've learned watching your videos and also in Kama Sutra and all of that. So how would you balance this need for including application in games with, I don't know, like if I want to make an action game matched with RPG elements or something like that, but I need to have application, you know? So that kind of like is a constraint. How would you deal with that in mobile industry?
That sounds like a good one for the designers. The question is basically like in the mobile space, since application is such a key part of the experience and that's what so many of that audience is looking for, like it's kind of a really big restriction if you're not wanting to necessarily make that a big part of your game. And how do you work around that? How do you deal with that?
So for me, I would say that first off, that's something that a lot of people are looking for. But you only care if what you're really looking to do is hit 10 million people, right? 50 million people. You may not worry about that, right? You may hit the niche that doesn't want that. Or the times at which those people want something different. But you can also look at other things, right? World of Warcraft is in large part an navigation game as well. If you exclude certain ratings. Facebook, the experience of Facebook itself for most people is a navigation experience. What was that? So the experience of Facebook itself is an application experience for most people, the way most people use it. So there's lots of different ways that we provide this. And then if you really, really care, you can slide people away from that, right? You can start people at that point, get them invested, and then bring them towards more and more complex activities. But that's my thoughts. What about you guys?
Sorry, I feel like a wet rag. This is so not the space that I operate in. I mean, for the most part. Yeah.
All right, good answer. No, you should
Okay, on this side I see some sort of hat. I think it's a hat. Yeah, it's a hat.
What happens with extra remix and extra design? I hear all these songs from you now.
Right. Yeah, so he's asking what happened to Extra Remix and Design Club. Basically, they still happen, just whenever I have time to work on them. Like Extra Remix is one that I enjoy doing, but it takes a lot of my time to do because it's basically me doing it solo. I write it, I voice it, I do all the editing, and I like doing it a lot. And I have like a list of a dozen like artists that I want to get to for Extra Remix. Yeah, some of them are here. One of them is playing in 30 minutes. Yeah, some of them I've got to meet here for the first time. Some of them I've met here at MAGFest in previous years. It's been awesome. I met I don't know if he's in here now, but I met the guy who wrote our intro theme this weekend for the first time.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to continue that. And Design Club is also still continuing. Like the most recent one was the Punch Out one, the animation one, which yeah, again, one that I wrote myself because I'm the animator on the team.
And that's really been the problem with Design Club, right? We've experimented with trying other designers, and we haven't really settled on somebody who, my life's been super hectic. I've had too much to do. Any of you guys watch James Recommend know I do it in 5 minutes at 3 a.m. whenever I can find the time, right? And so just finding someone to do Design Club, it's something that I would like to do periodically and jump in on. We just haven't really found the right writer for Design Club regularly either, or the right mix of people to periodically do one.
Yeah, since we've obviously had to slide back on that, on making those weekly or bi-weekly type shows, I think we instead want to just focus on making them really polished and really like high production, as good and as long as they need to be. Like the Punch Out one is a good bit longer than a lot of our earlier ones, and put a lot more time and effort into the editing and work on it. I just want to make them all nice and polished now if we're not going to be coming out with them all the time.
Oh, but I do know exactly the one I want to do next. How many guys have played Baldur's Gate? Like the first one? So if you remember Baldur's Gate well, do you guys remember Durlog's Tower?
Yes!
Durlog's Tower is one of the best dungeons I have ever seen designed in a game. There's so much that's right about how they design it. And even where they're wrong, their experimentation is really interesting. So I want to do a deep deconstruction, like a multiple episode deconstruction of just Durlog's Tower. We'll see when I get that time.
I'm going to probably enlist all of you for footage capture on that one. So, okay, let's have another question here. Let's see, you in the gate right in the front.
Awesome. This actually ties into Design Club, because I really love the contract. So
thank you.
Are we going to get any more on the animation games, and what games recently have had really nice character animation in-game that relays as much information as the contract games did? And as an addition, as a indie animator for games, how should I approach that kind of animation design?
Right on. So yeah, there will probably be more Design Club animation themed type episodes in the future. Basically, as soon as I see a game that gets me like pumped enough to like, okay, I have to make an episode about this. Because Punch Out for the Wii I had not even seen or played until like 8 months ago. And then I was just furious that nobody had told me about this game. That was so cool, because the more I looked at it, the more impressed I was by it. But yeah, I would love to make some more animation themed ones in the future. If I see a game that excites me enough, or I think about an animation issue that games have that I want to approach enough. As for working as an indie animator in games yourself, do you work in like 2D sprite or 3D? What do you do?
2D sprites.
Okay, I've not done a lot of 2D sprite stuff myself, and with, I guess depending on the resolution, you're super limited in terms of expressiveness. I imagine you have to like work pretty broad to like communicate emotion.
Well, I mostly work in
Okay.
CRISPR.
Nice. Okay. In that case, what sort of games do you work on? Like,
I've done a game jam. I've been doing game jams a lot, and those mostly do between platformers. So a lot of jumping sprites, dying sprites.
right. Lots of game action.
Yeah, a lot of
So,
basic
yeah.
game action.
Okay, so, and especially with games, making the shift from film for me has been a bit of a learning experience as well, because there you have all the time in the world to it's only about performance, and that's all. It's not about like the action that the characters have to do, but instead I've found that you have to focus a lot more on putting the character into every single action you can, just in the timing of the jumps, in the way they run, whether it's a really bouncy one, or trying to put character, like as much like, you know, those character walk cycles and exercises that students have to do all the time, where they have to try to like do just a walk that feels like someone interesting and unique, like basically doing that, trying to find the character in the way they move and interact around the space. Like the way Rayman characters move around, like, is super cartoony and bouncy and fun, and like this really nice and peeled and smooth, and like, I think they've totally found a character that not only the characters have, but that the game has in that animation style, that kind of appeal. So I think that's definitely a thing to shoot for.
And don't worry about taking stuff to 11, right? Like, whether it be Metal Slug or what happens to Mario when he dies, right? These really expressive, big, ridiculous moments, depending on the game, but for a lot of games, what seems a little bit too big for you in the action in the moment for the player is actually what you read really well.
Yeah, generally it seems like going broader is better than going subtler for the most part, especially in the game action and stuff.
Are you familiar with the video called Juice It Up?
Yes.
Yeah, it's two indie developers, one of the Scandinavian countries. Sorry, anyone from Scandinavia. And they did they took Pong and then said, how can we make this awesome without actually changing the game at all? And it's just animation and making it bigger. Like you said, I would recommend it if you're interested in using small visual details to convey expression.
I'm watching Juice It Up. Okay. All right, let's have another question here. On this side, some sort of gray box. That's the thing. Yeah. How do you get into video game writing?
Alright. So this is actually really good, because the question is, how do you get into video game writing? And I'm going to give the depressing answer. And then do you want to give the less depressing answer?
Sorry, do you mean writing for games or about games? For games.
Do you want to give a less depressing answer than what I'm about to give?
All right, you go first, and I'll do better.
All right, so I can work with this. So, all right, the problem is that we are writing for games. If you're talking about big AAA games, is something that there aren't often junior writer positions, right? A lot of times we take our designers and make them do a lot of that copywriting. A lot of times they hire people from outside the industry, people who have experience in comics or film or television, and there are not as many just writer positions in games. It's more now than it used to be. Be prepared for the fact that especially a lot of the early writing positions, will be writing things like item descriptions, right? We'll be writing a lot of just instructional text and probably not be writing world or story at all. So no, there's a long. On the other hand, there are a lot of paths now to get into writing for things outside of the AAA space. And a lot of people I know have begun writing often volunteer work, but for small indie companies, this sort of thing. And once they get a title or two under their belt, have started just calling themselves a writer and calling themselves a contractor and cold calling everybody, right? Start sending cards out to everybody, sending resumes out to everybody, and all you need is one or two people to pick you up, and you're set. But it's not as straightforward as here's a linear path inside the industry that takes you to the title that you're a writer.
Yeah, it's actually really, really messy. And it's messy for everyone. I mean, even, it's not like artists have thank God we have an established place in the video games industry. You know, it's all straightforward from there, right? So, I mean, it's already messy. It's just messier than other things. This is one that as soon as you begin to parse it apart, like each of the pieces that you've picked apart then goes down into smaller and smaller sub-pieces, so I'll try to stay like as big picture as I can. But a really important question is, why do you want to be a writer? This is probably important for any craft, but I think for writing it's very specifically important because there are not that many currently available options. So if what you want is to write for the kind of thing that already exists, you need to be like dead on certain about that. Because what's not going to work is that you want to write really expressive and interesting stories, and so you try to go work at a big company because you're doing less than no progress toward what you want to be doing. You're actually wasting time that you could be spending doing what you actually want to do, right? Because but maybe you do want to go work at that big company, right? Like James says, as soon as you do that, then there's process, right? Then there's not just the fact that I'm writing a story. There's politics, right? Then there's the structure of how you advance, and not just in the industry, but in this particular company that I'm trying to go to, right? And just raw persistence has a lot to do with it because you don't know how most of those companies work, right? Because you haven't worked at them yet. There's nothing like persistence. Persistence and honing in as much as you can on what do you want. And when you realize that you've been pursuing something you don't want, getting out. That's a trap, is you can end up trying to do something that you eventually start to get this nagging feeling and you're like, something about this isn't right. But if you don't follow that feeling, again, you do less than no progress because you're wasting time. And I mean, it's also easy for me to get up here and say this because like I forewent all of that and I just made my own thing, right? And sometimes that works. Or rather, you know, to heck with works, sometimes it becomes like known and successful. If it's what you wanted to make, then it always works, right? And one way to guarantee that it works on that level is to make your own thing. But again, you're dealing with what do you really want? And if what you want is to be part of a system and a structure that makes sense, and writing your own thing often doesn't make sense, or often you don't have the resources to be able to do that, I don't know, there's nothing like persistence and just brute forcing it until you figure out what you want.
And I just wanted to add, by the way, read and live. There are too many writers who I've met in this industry, or people who have ended up having to write for games, who their whole life is video games and the video game industry, and they don't have a perspective beyond it. And this is why we get so many stories about orcs and elves, right? And they're more likely to read Star Wars fanfic, or and there's anything wrong with it, right? Or hack fantasy than they are to go back and look at some of the timeless works that have stuck with us for a reason, right? Go dig into all that. Go dig into all the things that have resonated with humanity over centuries, and then go and have your life have other experiences. Get beyond the walls that games right now put around us, and bring that into your writing. Bring that in, because that will allow you to bring something new and different and personal. And if you do not have that new and different and personal thing, there is no space, right? Because you already have those guys who can write your generic orc sales story.
All right, let's see if we can get a few more questions in. Good answers, by the way. Let's see, Gabriella.
So I've got a couple of things.
You should repeat the question.
All right, let me call. So we have a fellow who's a computer science student who wants to make games. Who wants to make games that help society. And so the question was sort of, how do I do that? What should I learn from this industry? But also, what can the world learn from this industry that may not be games themselves? And it may surprise a lot of you guys to know, but if you go back, watch the episode on engagement curve or interest curve. And go watch the extra history episodes. All the extra history, the first extra history episodes were actually just an intellectual experiment on my part on whether or not I could apply interest curve to teaching history. And it seems to resonate with a fair number of people, right? There's all these psychological things that we have learned from spending billions and billions of dollars trying to figure out how to engage a human being that we can immediately bring in and start applying to other aspects of our life. And read things like Jesse Schell's Book of Lenses has a lot of really good, broad pieces that we can bring in and apply to anything. As far as making more socially impactful games, right now my honest suggestion to you is work with smaller companies or indie companies because they're more willing to take the risk on addressing these things. I don't think addressing these things is actually the risk the big AAA companies think it is. In fact, I think we need to expand our audience in order to support the budgets that AAA games now demand. But you're going to get a lot more progress a lot faster, working with independent Steam. Start making some stuff now. There's no reason why you can call it grab some people. Get it out there. Get people looking at it. Make sure that your message is actually getting across. And just show it to people. If there's people who you respect in the independent games community and games community at large, try sending the tweet, right? Just try saying, hey, would you mind checking out what I think? Because we're not as unapproachable as it may seem from the outside. Well, there you go. Like, that was an excellent example. Have you seen Never Alone? There was an example of people totally outside the games industry commissioning something to, and there are points of success and points of failure there, right? But just even taking that first step to try and show it, got lots of people talking about a subject that they would never have otherwise been talking about. For all the games, merits and for all the games' faults, right? But do you have any thoughts?
Well, just very, very quickly, I think it's important to note when talking about these things that you should really love making this thing, right? I mean, like, obviously we all want, you know, social progress and we want to pursue equal opportunity and rights and the ability to live for everyone. But if that isn't a subject that you're passionate about, or if you're pursuing a subject inside of that you're not passionate about, you literally may not have the energy to pursue it to the length where it will make an impact for someone, right? And I think this is important, you know, like, I think it's important to consider, like, what do you want to do, right? Like, do you really care about this? And I'm not implying that anyone making these things doesn't care about them, but I think it's just important to reiterate, because when you do care about it, you'll go to the ends of the earth to make sure that change actually happens.
All right, now we're running out of time here, but here's what's going to happen. We are going to, in a few minutes, walk over to the forums room, which is open, where they say that we can keep doing this as long as we want to. Anybody who wants to come in who has a question that we haven't answered, we're going to stay in there until you guys literally have nothing left to ask and you've all left. So,
truth be told, by the way, I think when we've done this in the past, it gets way cool when we move to the forum room because there isn't this us sitting at a table, you guys, because what is that, right? Like, our meeting's interactive, so too should all these things be. Let's just go sit in the circle and have a discussion, right? Let's just like talk.
yeah, that would be